Silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. That quote. It hits different when you've been loud your whole life just to be heard, just to be seen, only to realize that what truly captivates them isn't your words, it's your silence. Not the kind that sulks in corners or avoids confrontation, but the kind that walks away with calm eyes, a steady breath, and nothing left to prove. My friends, what if I told you that silence, true, dark, composed silence, is the very thing that makes you unforgettable, that the less you speak, the more they feel, the less you chase, the more they search. It's not about disappearing to get their attention. It's about rising so still, so detached, that your absence becomes louder than your presence ever did. Hey folks, imagine this. You were once the fire in the room, sparking texts, explaining everything, trying to fix misunderstandings before they even began. And now you've become the storm after the fire, quiet, unshakable, untouchable. You didn't scream, you didn't post, you didn't beg, you just pulled your energy inward, and it's driving them mad. It's like being the ocean, deep, still on the surface, but no one knows what's happening underneath. That kind of silence. It's terrifying to those who thought they knew you. It makes them second-guess, overthink, spiral. Because when you stop reacting, you stop being predictable. And when you stop being predictable, you become addictive. They told you silence was weakness, that if you didn't speak up, you'd be forgotten, that if you didn't explain, they'd misunderstand you. Here's the truth they never wanted you to find out. The moment you go quiet, not out of fear, but out of mastery, you shift the entire dynamic. You're no longer trying to win. You are the win. There's something about a man who can hold himself together without needing to be understood. It's Stoicism in its purest form. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And silence, my friends, is the bravest form of communication. It says, I don't need to prove myself, I just am. And let's be real for a second. You ever notice how loud people get when they're losing control? That's because control loves noise. But power, real power, it sits quietly and watches. And when you stop giving explanations, when you stop feeding the fire with your emotions, they begin to crave the calm you carry. They crave it because it's rare. This is where the game flips. You're no longer available on demand. You're not leaving breadcrumbs, not updating your story to be seen, not reacting to every passive-aggressive message. You've become a void that echoes, a mystery that grows in silence, a man who is felt more in his absence than he ever was in his presence. And that silence, that deep, dark, composed stillness, it becomes magnetic. It starts living rent-free in their mind. Because while others scramble to be heard, you've chosen to be felt instead. That's Stoic power. So before we get into the 8 ways this silence rewires their entire perception of you, drop a comment right now and type, "Stillness is strength." Show the world, and more importantly, show yourself, that you're no longer a slave to noise. You're stepping into silence, not because you're lost, but because you've arrived. Like the video, subscribe to stay connected to this energy, and let's begin. Number 1, silence that shifts the dynamic instantly. A lion doesn't turn around when a small dog barks. That's the energy. That's the silence we're talking about. Not passive, not weak, but a stillness so deep, so composed, that it shakes the ground without a sound. That's the kind of silence that shifts everything, from the way they see you to the way they feel about you. It's not about shutting down, it's about rising up, quietly. Now imagine this. You used to be the one always explaining, always making things clear, always trying to keep the peace even when it came at the cost of your own. And they got used to that. They got used to you being predictable, comfortable, emotionally available on tap. But one day, you stopped. You didn't warn them. You didn't argue. You didn't give them a dramatic goodbye. You just started showing up differently, calmer, quieter, more internal. And that shift, that subtle switch from noise to stillness, it changed everything. Because silence from a man who used to give everything is deafening, it's haunting. It makes them question the reality they were so sure of. Why did they stop explaining? Why aren't they reacting like before? Did they stop caring? Did they finally see through the illusion? That's when the power flips. That's when your silence becomes louder than all the noise they used to hear from you. Folks, let's be honest. Most people fear silence because they've been conditioned to believe that if you're not speaking, you're losing, that if you're not defending yourself, you're guilty, that if you're not reacting, you don't care. But that's a lie. A loud, desperate, controlling lie. The truth is, silence is not emptiness. It's focus. It's self-control. It's the refusal to perform for people who no longer value your words. They thought silence meant defeat. But what they didn't expect is that silence would become the most powerful presence in the room. Because when you stop explaining, you stop giving away your energy. You stop managing their emotions. You stop trying to prove something. And in that stillness, you start becoming someone else. Someone stronger, someone centered, someone who doesn't need approval to stay calm. And yes, at first it feels hard, it feels unfamiliar, especially if you've always been the fixer, the explainer, the one who made sure everyone understood your intentions. There's fear. What if they misunderstand me? What if they think I don't care? What if they move on? But here's what you need to understand. When you keep explaining yourself, you're not gaining clarity. You're losing yourself. You're telling them, your perception of me matters more than my peace. And that's how you give away your power. Marcus Aurelius said, the more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. And their opinion, their reaction, their validation, that's outside your control. What is in your control? Your stillness, your silence, your restraint, your choice to stop performing just to be seen. So when you go silent, not from ego, but from alignment, you stop playing their emotional game. You're no longer the puppet. You're the one holding the strings now. And they feel that deeply. They might not admit it. They might act unbothered. But trust this, when someone is used to controlling you with words, with emotions, with guilt, and suddenly none of it works anymore, they spiral. Because silence exposes everything noise used to hide. They sit with that silence. They overanalyze. They replay what they said, what they didn't say. They wait for your reaction, but it never comes. And in that waiting, they start to feel what you felt. The doubt, the confusion, the wondering. But here's the difference. You're no longer trying to solve it. You're done carrying the emotional weight for two. And folks, that's when something powerful happens. You go from being the one who's always trying to keep things balanced to being the one who is the balance. Your energy shifts, your presence sharpens, and you become unforgettable. Not because you were loud, but because you were still when it mattered most. Think of a mountain. It doesn't argue, it doesn't move, but it's impossible to ignore. That's who you're becoming when you choose silence. A presence that commands respect without demanding it. A man who no longer chases clarity because he is clarity. And when they feel that shift, when they see you no longer reacting, no longer explaining, no longer begging to be understood, that's when the addiction begins. Because you've become the mystery they can't solve, the calm they can't create without you, the stillness they never appreciated until it was gone. So if this resonates, if you're tired of over-explaining, of being misunderstood, of performing just to be accepted, drop a comment right now and type, "My silence is my power." Show yourself. Show to the world that you're no longer fueled by the need to be heard, but by the strength of being unshaken. And stay with me, because what's coming next will show you how this dark silence doesn't just shift the dynamic once, it creates a permanent emotional imprint they can't outrun. Number 2, the withdrawal that makes them spiral. You don't always have to say something. Sometimes silence speaks the loudest truth. There comes a moment when you don't raise your voice. You don't defend yourself. You don't try to clean up the emotional mess left behind. You just withdraw, quietly, without noise, without explanation. And that's what makes it powerful. Because when you withdraw, not out of anger, but out of clarity, it stings in a different way. Not because you were cold, but because you were finally calm. And that calm, that silence, is what makes them spiral. My friends, people don't expect peace. They expect tension. They expect drama. They're prepared for arguments, long texts, emotional reactions. But what they aren't prepared for is nothing. No reply, no defense, no closure, just your presence folding inward like a wave retreating from the shore, not to disappear, but to gather more strength. You see, when you were reactive, when you explained, when you chased, when you filled every silent space with words, they felt safe. Not emotionally safe, but in control. Because your reactions gave them emotional leverage. They could predict you, but now you've pulled back, not to manipulate, but to protect. And when you stop feeding the fire, the whole structure starts to fall apart. They start to notice the rhythm they were used to, gone, the attention they took for granted, vanished, the emotional mirror you used to hold up for them, shattered, and now they're left looking at their own reflection, their own patterns, their own behavior. That's the kind of silence that makes someone spiral, not because you're punishing them, but because for the first time they're sitting with themselves. And let's be real, it's terrifying for someone who's used to being chased, because when you stop reaching out, you stop reinforcing the illusion that you need them to be whole. Your withdrawal becomes a mirror to their insecurity, to their manipulation, to the chaos they brought into your life, and your refusal to carry it any longer. Most people don't leave the room quietly. They slam the door. They want to be seen, to be remembered, to leave one last emotional mark. But you didn't slam anything. You just left the energy behind. You didn't leave to be dramatic. You left because staying would have cost you yourself. And that's what breaks them more than anything else, your peace. There's a dangerous lie we've all been fed, that if you love someone, you stay no matter what. That walking away means you didn't care enough. But here's the truth that Stoicism teaches us. You protect what you value. And if you value yourself, you walk away from anything that threatens your inner peace. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. They may act unbothered, they may post like they've moved on, they may talk to others just to prove a point. But late at night, when the noise settles and the distractions fade, that's when the silence hits them hardest. Not because you're punishing them, but because for the first time they're hearing what your presence used to silence, their own restlessness. You're not missing. You're just no longer emotionally available on demand. You're no longer giving them access to the parts of you they never respected. And that lack of access becomes a vacuum, a void. An emotional black hole they didn't expect to face. And the mind, it hates voids. It fills them with thoughts, doubts, fear, regret. It spirals. And while they spiral, you're rising. You're not watching their story. You're writing your own. You're not checking if they noticed. You already know they did, because silence, real silence, the kind that comes from strength, is always felt. It creates weight, gravity. And once you've mastered it, you realize you never needed to raise your voice to be heard. You just had to stop lowering yourself to be understood. There's nothing louder than a calm man who chooses himself. There's nothing more powerful than emotional restraint. Because when you no longer react, you no longer hand over your power. You keep it. You build with it. You evolve through it. That's why your withdrawal is not absence, it's elevation. And they feel that shift deep in their chest. And don't get it twisted, this isn't about punishing them, it's not about control, it's about healing. Healing from the need to be validated. Healing from the belief that you owe everyone an explanation. Healing from the lie that says being quiet is being weak. No, my friend, your withdrawal is your warrior silence. It's how you reclaim yourself without making a scene. So if you're sitting in that silence right now, if you're doubting whether it's noticed, trust this, they feel it. They feel it because your silence is the echo of every time they mistook your kindness for weakness. Your silence is the memory of your calm. And that calm, it's what they'll crave when the chaos they chased starts to collapse in on them. Drop a comment right now and type, "My calm is my power." Let it be your reminder and their signal that you're no longer fueled by emotional reactions. You've entered a new era, one where your silence isn't confusion, it's clarity, where your withdrawal isn't rejection, it's protection. And stay close, because in the next part, we're going even deeper into how your mystery becomes the very thing they can't stop chasing, even long after you've stopped showing up. Number 3. When mystery becomes their addiction. The less they know about you, the more they think about you. That's not a game, that's psychology, that's human nature. The mind obsesses over what it can't decode, and what it doesn't fully understand, it can't let go of. When you become a mystery, not through manipulation, but through calm detachment, something begins to shift. Not just in how they see you, but in how they feel you. You stop being predictable, you stop being emotionally readable, and in that silence, in that space, they begin to spiral. Not because you said anything wrong, but because you didn't say anything at all. Think about it. You used to wear your heart on your sleeve. You used to tell them how you felt, what you feared, what you hoped for, how much you cared. You handed them the script. You gave them the whole story, word for word, and they got comfortable, not because they respected it, but because it made them feel in control. They could read you, they could predict you, and people love predictability because it makes them feel safe, even if they don't deserve that safety. But now, you've stopped. You've pulled your energy inward. You still feel, you still think, you still notice, but you don't speak it all out loud anymore. And that shift? That's what drives them crazy. Because the moment they can't read your energy, they start questioning everything. Are they okay? Do they still care? Are they over me? Are they talking to someone else? The silence doesn't just confuse them, it consumes them. And it's not because you're trying to be distant. It's because you're finally centered. You're no longer pouring yourself out just to be understood. You're no longer explaining your heart just to calm their insecurity. You've realized that some things aren't meant to be explained. Some things are meant to be felt or missed. And the mystery you now carry, that's what makes you unforgettable. Folks, they don't miss the person who talked too much. They don't miss the one who always sent the long paragraph trying to fix things. They miss the one who, out of nowhere, stopped performing, stopped chasing, stopped showing up the way they expected. Because when your pattern breaks, their obsession begins. Mystery becomes addiction when someone has tasted your depth but never got to the bottom of it. When they've seen glimpses of your strength, your love, your discipline, but never quite figured out what truly drives you. That's when they start looping your memory in their mind. That's when your silence starts screaming louder than anything you could ever say. And the more they try to solve the riddle, the deeper they fall into it. They'll scan your online activity, they'll reread old texts, they'll play your voice in their head just to decode your last words. But it won't work, because you're no longer giving them access, and that access wasn't taken away to be cruel. It was taken away to protect your peace, to honor your growth, to realign with your standards. Stoicism teaches us that power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. You don't control what they feel, you control what you give. And when you give less, deliberately, peacefully, without resentment, you create a vacuum that no one else can fill. Not because you're irreplaceable in the ego sense, but because you offered something rare: stillness, discipline, depth, mystery. And in a world addicted to oversharing, to validation, to attention-seeking, being mysterious is power. Not because you're hiding, but because you don't need to be constantly seen. You're not avoiding, you're preserving. And the man who preserves himself becomes the one they remember. Not the loud one, not the dramatic one, but the one who disappeared into himself and came out even more untouchable. So when they can't read you anymore, they can't control the story. And that's when the story begins to haunt them. That's when every memory becomes an open loop. And our brains hate open loops. They try to close them. They try to seek resolution. But you're no longer offering one. That silence is the unsolvable puzzle, and it lingers. The best part: you didn't have to fake it. You didn't have to ghost them. You just stopped explaining what you should have never had to explain in the first place. You stopped justifying your emotions. You stopped chasing clarity from someone who only respected confusion. And now they want what you no longer give, not because you're withholding, but because you've elevated, and they can feel that shift in their bones. So if you've ever felt the urge to explain, to clarify, to overshare, pause. Ask yourself, am I giving them mystery? Or am I giving them control? Because the more they think they know you, the less they value you. But the moment they realize they don't know you anymore, that's when they start to chase, not the old you, but the version of you that doesn't need to be decoded to be felt. Drop a comment right now and type, "Mystery is magnetic." Let it be your new standard. Let the world know your silence isn't a gap. It's a wall, a sacred one. One that guards your energy, your peace, your power. And stay tuned, because what's coming next will show you how your presence becomes an echo in the silence, one that lives in their head long after you've gone. Number 4, you become the echo in the silence. Your absence will teach them what your presence never could. That's the brutal truth most people don't realize until it's too late. It's easy to overlook someone when they're always there, when replies come quick, when the energy flows constantly, when your presence feels guaranteed. But take that presence away, and everything changes. Not because you made a scene, not because you left a note, but because you disappeared so silently, so cleanly, that your absence became louder than your words ever did. They thought your presence was normal, routine, familiar. But now it's missed. Not because you slammed the door on your way out, but because you didn't need to. You left the space undisturbed, and that silence, it started echoing. Echoes of your calm, echoes of your patience, echoes of the moments they overlooked, ignored, or thought would last forever. And now? Now the room feels too quiet. See, when you're constantly available, people assume you'll always be there. When you're the one who reaches out first, who softens conflict with understanding, who explains just to make things smooth, your presence gets taken for granted. It gets consumed without gratitude. They feel secure, not in love, but in control. But the moment you stop showing up like that, the moment you stop over-explaining, stop checking in, stop being emotionally available just because they snap their fingers, that's when the withdrawal hits. Not just as a missing person in their inbox, but as a haunting memory in their mind. And let's be clear, you didn't go silent to hurt them. You didn't withdraw to punish. You withdrew to reclaim yourself, to preserve your energy, to remind yourself that you're not someone to be accessed casually. And because you didn't fill the silence with drama or ego, it became heavier. It became a mirror, One they're now forced to look into. They scroll through your old conversations. They replay the tone of your voice. They hear your laugh in a quiet room. They imagine what you might say now, but you don't, because you've stepped into stillness, not as a tactic, but as a lifestyle. That's when they realize something they never saw coming. Your presence was holding them together, not loudly, not forcefully, but gently, like gravity. And now that gravity is gone, they're floating, not free, but lost, because it wasn't just your words that mattered. It was the energy you brought into the space, the safety, the discipline, the composure, all of which are now gone. You didn't vanish out of spite. You didn't delete your existence. You just stopped speaking, and in doing so you forced them to listen, not to you, but to themselves, to their behavior, to the things they said that they thought would be forgiven, to the attitude they had when they thought you wouldn't walk away. But now you're gone, and their ego has no one left to dance with. Folks, that's what makes silence so haunting, not the absence of sound, but the presence of what's no longer there. And when they try to fill that space with new people, new distractions, new conversations, it still doesn't land the same, because deep down they know none of it replaces you. Not because you were loud, but because you were anchored. Stoic men don't vanish, they ascend. And in doing so, they leave behind not a hole, but an echo, one that bounces off every wall of memory, every silent phone screen, every night they lie in bed wondering why it feels so different now, why no one else makes them feel quite as stable, why no one else makes silence feel so safe. And this is the part they never expected. They thought you'd eventually come back. They thought you'd break the silence like you used to, but you didn't, because this time, you finally chose you. And once a man discovers that peace is more valuable than being understood, he never goes back to chaos just to be seen. They start asking questions they never asked before. Were they really that calm all along? Did I mistake their silence for weakness? Were they the one who truly had the power? And the more they sit in that silence, the more they realize, yes, you were, you are, because only the strong can walk away quietly and stay gone. That echo in the silence, it's not emptiness, it's you, still being felt even when you're no longer present. And the beautiful thing is, you're not chasing that validation anymore. You're not waiting to be missed. You're not performing in hopes of getting a message. You've let go, not for them, but for you. You've made peace with the stillness, and now it speaks louder than any voice ever could. So if this message lands somewhere deep in your chest, drop a comment right now and type, "I am the echo." Let the world know that your silence isn't absence, it's presence. A presence so rooted, so disciplined, so unwavering that it stays alive even in your withdrawal. And don't go anywhere, because in the next part, we're going to break down exactly how your stillness doesn't just make them miss you. It destroys the illusion of control they thought they had. The silence, it's just getting started. Number 5. Stillness that breaks their illusion of control. True power is not in how loud you speak, but in how little you need to. They thought they had the upper hand, not because they were stronger, wiser, or more grounded, but because you always responded. You always cared enough to clarify, explain, soothe, smooth things over. You were predictable, steady, emotionally available, even when it cost you your peace. And that consistency, my friend, was mistaken for control. Not the good kind, the kind they thought they could push and pull like a lever. Until one day, you didn't flinch. You didn't reply. You didn't react. You just stayed still. And that stillness shattered everything they thought they understood about you. Because here's the hard truth. People get used to the power they think they have over you. They get used to seeing you bend, break, chase, apologize, just to maintain the connection. And the moment you stop, the moment you go quiet, not with anger, but with clarity, you don't just confuse them, you collapse the entire illusion of emotional control they were holding on to. They used to know how to get a reaction. They knew which words could trigger you, which silences could make you panic, which tones could make you fold. But now you're unmoved, unshaken. You're there, but you're no longer in it. You see the game, but you're not playing, and that's what burns them the most. You didn't slam the door. You didn't raise your voice. You simply stopped being manipulated by the moment, and in doing so, you took back all the power they thought they had. That's the thing about Stoic men. They don't yell, they don't beg, they don't explode. They observe, they understand, and then they detach, not to hurt, but to heal. And it hurts. Oh, it hurts them deeply, not because you attacked them, but because you stopped reacting to their attacks, because you stopped playing your usual role in their emotional drama. You used to be the one calming them down, chasing clarity, trying to fix what wasn't yours to fix. But now, you're just still, and that stillness isn't cold. It's collected. It's the quiet you feel when a storm has passed and you finally see the destruction it left behind. That's what they feel now. They see what they did, what they said, what they took for granted. And your stillness doesn't let them escape it. It forces them to feel it. And that's the beginning of their spiral, not your silence, but the reflection it brings. Because when you stop giving them emotional control, you force them to face their own lack of control. They're no longer in charge of how you feel, how you react, how you move. And people addicted to power, they hate that. They hate losing their favorite supply, your energy. But here's what you've learned. Real control begins with letting go. Stoicism teaches that we are only responsible for what's within our reach. Not their behavior, not their perception, just our own actions, our own responses, our own energy. And your new energy, it's unavailable to manipulation, unreachable to passive aggression, untouchable by guilt. You've become an emotional fortress, not because you're closed off, but because you're finally guarding the gates, and the ones who used to walk in and out whenever they wanted. They don't know how to handle the locked doors. They don't know how to cope when the emotional switches no longer work. They press every button, and nothing happens. That's when they start to unravel, because they realize the only power they had over you was the power you gave them. They'll test you. They'll send those bait texts. They'll play hot and cold. They'll throw little emotional hooks, trying to pull you back into their storm. But your stillness? It becomes the proof that you've graduated, that you've outgrown the game, that their tricks no longer belong in your atmosphere. And the silence you carry isn't passive, it's commanding. It says, I see everything, and I choose nothing. That's terrifying to someone who's used to controlling the narrative. And the best part? You didn't need revenge. You didn't need a speech. You didn't even need closure. You just chose peace. You stopped trying to be right. You stopped trying to be understood. And that decision, that quiet decision, it destroyed the illusion they lived in. So if you're in that space now, if you've chosen stillness and they don't know what to do with it, stand tall. Don't question your silence. Honor it. Because it's not just distance, it's discipline, not just quiet, but power. Drop a comment right now and type, I don't chase control, I own my calm. Let them see it, let you see it. Because your silence isn't weakness, it's evolution. And what comes next? It's not you chasing closure, it's them chasing the version of you they never really understood and now can't seem to forget. Stay with me. Because up next, we're diving into what happens when you stop orbiting around them and they start chasing the ghost of who you used to be. The addiction, it hasn't even peaked yet. Number 6. When you detach, they chase their own reflection. Detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring so deeply for your peace that you refuse to suffer for what's out of your control. You didn't walk away out of anger. You didn't shut down because you stopped feeling. No, you detached because you finally saw things for what they really were, not the illusion, not the fantasy, but the truth. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You realized your worth can't be negotiated. Your energy is not a currency they can trade with attention, mixed signals, or empty words. So you pulled back, not to teach them a lesson, but to remind yourself who you are. And the moment you detached, something shifted. Not just inside you, but inside them. Because when someone's used to you orbiting their world, checking in, seeking closeness, offering endless emotional access, and suddenly that stops, they don't know what to do with themselves. They thought you'd always be there, circling around them like a moon around a planet. But now, you're no longer in their gravitational pull. You've exited the atmosphere, and that emptiness, it hits them hard. See, most people don't miss you. They miss the version of themselves that felt powerful when you were constantly reacting, when you were always available, when your world revolved around their emotional highs and lows. But the moment you detached, they were left alone with their own reflection, and they don't like what they see. That's the irony. You're not chasing them anymore. You're not validating their worth with your attention. You're not filling their voids with reassurance. So now they're chasing a ghost, a memory, a moment when they felt in control, when they felt admired, desired, wanted. But that version of you is gone. That version of you who was reactive, needy, emotionally exposed, that version died the moment you chose stillness over suffering. And you didn't detach with drama. You didn't make a scene. You didn't need to explain it with a 2-page text. You just slowly removed yourself from the chaos. You chose calm over closure, distance over dysfunction. And that's what makes it so powerful, because when you leave quietly, people start making noise, not because you said something wrong, but because you stopped saying anything at all. Now they spiral, not over you, but over their own reflection. Was I too harsh? Did I push too far? Why aren't they reacting? That's what keeps them up at night, not your presence, but the absence of your reactions. The stillness where your energy used to be. And the longer you stay silent, the louder it echoes in their mind. And here's the part that stings them most. They don't know who you are anymore. Because you're no longer the emotional responder. You're no longer the one trying to fix, to heal, to prove your love through sacrifice. You've stepped into a different identity now, one rooted in stoic power, emotional maturity, and unwavering boundaries. You've become unreachable, not because you disappeared, but because you've evolved. Detachment isn't bitterness, it's clarity. It's looking at the situation and saying, I don't hate you, I just love me more now. And when you operate from that place, everything changes. You don't argue, you don't explain, you don't seek validation, you just live. And the more you live without reacting to their old tactics, the more they start to chase what they lost, the power your attention used to give them. Now they're watching you, quietly, closely, wondering what's shifted, why you're not engaging, why their silence doesn't trigger you anymore. They'll send those vague texts, they'll like your posts, they'll leave just enough breadcrumbs hoping you'll pick them up. But you won't, because you've detached, not from feeling but from needing, and that's the difference between a boy and a man. The boy reacts, the man reflects. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That's what you've done. You've stopped chasing outcomes. You've stopped clinging to what wasn't stable, and in doing so, you've become the very thing they now obsess over, not because you chase them, but because you don't anymore. You're not being cold, you're being calm. And that calm, it's addictive. It makes them question everything. Because the moment you stopped feeding their ego, they had to face their own emptiness. And that emptiness echoes louder than any words ever could. So if you're in this season right now, if you're choosing detachment not out of hate, but out of healing, type this in the comments right now. I don't chase chaos. Let it be your truth. Let it be your standard. Let it be the reminder that when you detach, you don't lose people. You lose illusions. And what remains, that's real. Stick around, because in the next part we're going to talk about what happens when your silence doesn't just haunt them, but sets the new standard for every connection they'll ever try to build after you. Number 7. The silence that redefines their standard. After experiencing peace, chaos no longer feels like love. You didn't shout. You didn't slam the door. You didn't ghost them to play a game. You simply stopped performing. You stepped back, not to be missed, but to realign. And in that stillness, in that quiet departure, something powerful happened. You became the new standard, not because you forced it, but because you showed them what calm, grounded presence actually feels like. They thought you'd come back eventually, maybe to argue, maybe to explain, maybe to apologize for how distant you were. But you didn't. And that shook them more than any loud reaction ever could, because you weren't being passive, you were being intentional. You chose peace over pride, and in a world obsessed with noise, that kind of silence is unforgettable. Now every new connection they try to build gets compared to you, not your words, but your energy, your composure, your discipline, your restraint. They go on a date, and maybe the new person is charming, funny, even attractive. But the moment that person gets flustered, gets reactive, overshares, overreaches, they feel it. The contrast, the instability, and they remember you. They remember how your stillness made them feel safe, how you didn't need to dominate the conversation to hold power, how you didn't flinch when they tried to provoke you. You were still, you were sure, you were sovereign. That memory becomes the curse, because once someone tastes real peace, they can't uncrave it. And you were that peace, not because you tried to be, but because you were done trying altogether. So don't question whether your silence meant something. It did. It's still echoing in places they don't talk about. Because your presence didn't just leave a space, it left a standard. One they now realize most can't reach. If that resonates, drop a comment right now and type, "I set the standard." Let it be known that your stillness wasn't an exit. It was an elevation. And what's coming next? We're diving into the stillness that makes them spiral, not just because you're gone, but because you've changed. Number 8. The stillness that makes them spiral. The calmest ones leave the loudest void. You're not watching their stories. You're not checking their likes. You're not reaching out with just one last message. You've gone still, and not the kind of stillness that hopes to be noticed, but the kind that's rooted, grounded, final. You didn't announce your exit. You simply stopped needing to be involved. And that's what makes them spiral. Because they were prepared for chaos, for arguments, for a reaction. That's how it usually goes, right? But what they weren't ready for was your peace. Your calm silence that doesn't beg for closure, that doesn't chase answers, that doesn't ask to be understood. That kind of stillness, it's disturbing to someone who's used to holding emotional control. And now they're the one overthinking, replaying, wondering what it means that you've gone so quiet. They feel the shift, not in your words, but in your absence. They thought you'd stay tangled in the drama, but you left with grace. No explosions, no confusion, just stillness. And in that stillness, they start to hear every echo of the love, the presence, the stability you once brought. They thought you'd reach out eventually, that you'd need some kind of closure, but you didn't, because a Stoic doesn't need permission to let go. A Stoic understands that peace isn't won through noise, it's claimed in silence, and now they spiral, not because you hurt them, but because you healed. Without them, without asking. That's what makes your silence so unforgettable. It's not cold, it's clear, it's not loud, but it's felt. They can't replace it, can't forget it, can't stop wondering what it would take to feel that kind of presence again. And the truth? Most won't ever come close. So if you're in that space right now, own it. Stand in it. Because your stillness isn't weakness. It's arrival. If this message hit home, drop a comment right now and type, "Stillness is my power." Let the world know. Let you know. And if you're ready to keep evolving into the version of you that doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't break, then hit the like button, subscribe, and check out the next video. Stay grounded, stay quiet, stay powerful.